And so that was that light bulb in my mind that said, hey, there's a non-linear path here, a non-traditional path. We can get awesome results in the world without having to do all the work associated with it. I wanted to share today the 3 or 4 things that have really helped me on my journey to entrepreneurship and success and helping others be successful as well. I started out in sales, so that's the big, really cool thing is that if you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to change the world, then sales is a really good vehicle to do that. And there's a couple of really specific reasons that I think sales are people that can really shift into entrepreneurship really effectively. A lot of my work, a lot of the stuff that I do is dealing with geniuses, with technology-oriented people. I'm dealing with people that love stuff. They love technology. They love to understand how it works. And then my skill in being a salesperson or a communicator, let's call it, or an entrepreneur, they're all the same things, right? If you're an entrepreneur but you don't sell anything, then your business is going to die. That's just the reality of it. I mean, I deal with turnaround situations where there's companies that do multi-millions of dollars of business, and then they change a couple of strategic things, and then next year they're tanking and they lose all of the profits they made in that year. Why? Because they stopped selling. They took their eye off the prize. They stopped selling, and they have to then fire half of the workforce because they stopped selling. So sales is the gift that keeps on giving. And one of the things that I learned very early in my career is that really, when the economy stops when sales stop as well. So if you're not making sales, the whole economy stops. The trucks don't deliver any freight. The supermarkets don't have any fresh food and vegetables. I mean, you take sales away from the world, the whole world stops. So you're in a powerful situation. And that means that because sales are so powerful, most of the money in the world, most of the wealth around the world is to do with sales. It's to do with paying commissions. It's to do with paying large salaries to people that can bring the bacon home. Those people that have got the communication skills. You don't have to understand stuff like a lot of the other technical people. You don't have to understand that stuff. You just have to understand how to be a good communicator. You have to understand how to listen to your customers. You have to understand how to communicate more effectively, and that can make you a really great salesperson. For me, I came here to Australia when I was 2 years old, and I came here as a refugee. So my parents, my dad, in fact, was involved in some pretty bad stuff over in El Salvador, which is one of the worst crime countries in the world. And all of a sudden, we had some, let's say, we had a hit on our heads, and so there's some people in power that wanted my dad gone, and they were going to come after our family. And so my dad did the only natural thing, which was there was an application with the Australian government where you could apply, and you could seek refuge when you're in a really hostile situation. Our whole family applied. I mean, there was 10, 15 people in our family, probably even 20 people in our family that applied for this thing because everybody wanted to come to Australia. All that we knew in El Salvador, I was 2 years old, remember this. All we knew in El Salvador was that Australia was on the other side of the world, big dirt patch and nothing else. That's all we knew. But that was better than the life that we had in El Salvador. That dream of nothingness is better than a dream of tyranny, a dream of oppression, a dream of danger. A dream of just an empty pasture of dirt sounds way better than what we were living in El Salvador. So my parents decided to take the jump, and we came over here. We got accepted by the government. I grew up in the worst part of town. I grew up in the bad part of town. I grew up as somebody that just because of my experiences, I'd learned the rules of the game. I'd learned the rules of the game in school so much so that I realized I went for school captain, and I wasn't a good student. I was not top of the grades. I was not ducks. I never studied. I always went home from school. I didn't turn up to class. I was the worst student ever. And I saw in year 12, I was like, well, the school captain is always full of academics, people that love to study, good people that love to study. And I thought, this whole thing's a popularity contest. I saw the way that they voted, and I said, this whole thing's a popularity contest, so I'm going to go for it. And I ended up winning the school captaincy. I almost got it taken away very quickly afterwards. But I ended up winning. Why? Because I went and had communications with people. I started talking to them about the fact that, I was asking them about their lives. I was getting curious about what's going on in their world. I wanted to know what was going on in their family life. I wanted them to tell me what their dreams, hopes, and aspirations were. Genuinely, because I just wanted to know. I just like people. I just like talking to people. And they would tell me all these things, and I'd say, oh, by the way, I'm running for captain. Would you vote for me? And everybody said yes. And then everybody voted, and I got turned into school captain. It wasn't because I was the smartest or the brightest. It's because I knew how to build good relationships with people. And I'm going to uncover some of this stuff during this very small talk. So then from there, I guess, I realized that the non-linear path is the path for me. I don't want to have to study hard. I don't want to have to work hard. This was always my mindset. I don't want to have to work long hours. I don't want to have to do all this stuff. I want a better way. I want an easier way. And so that was that light bulb in my mind that said, hey, there's a non-linear path here, a non-traditional path. We can get awesome results in the world without having to do all the work associated with it. Now, I'm going to preface that with you've got to do a lot of hard work, trust me, and I will explain some of this in this presentation. But that's the premise, that the non-linear path is really important. So then I decided I don't want to do the traditional thing. I don't want to work I don't want to go work at Woolworths and pack boxes. I want to do something different. So I met a magic mentor. He was doing magician. Anyway, long story short, he ended up taking me under his wing. I ended up then trying to get a job as a magician, getting paid $500 an hour. And they said to me, you know what? If you really want to do this, what we suggest is that we dress you up like a clown. You do kids parties, and so you can get your confidence up. And instantly, and I will talk about this in a moment, my ego went a bit crazy. My ego said, no, I can't dress up as a clown. I can't do kids parties. Like, that's not me. Come on, I'm cooler than this. My self-image in school, like I had cornrows. I was the cool kid, always wearing baggy clothes. I was always swearing. I was a cool kid. So when I was confronted with this harsh reality of being judged as a clown, I went, nah, that's not for me. That's not for me. But this voice inside me, and this is point number one about sales. And I'm going to give you 3 strong points here. The first point is that your internal dialogue can make or break you. The voice inside your head can make or break you. Because when I had 2 voices inside my head. The first voice was like the ego voice. It's like, no, you can't do that. That's a place of ego. The other voice was like, hey, this actually might work. This little thing here that they're suggesting, this little piece of advice here could really work. So I decided to go with the smaller voice, the non-ego voice. And I didn't learn about the ego till much later in life. But the non-ego voice is the voice that I followed. So I ended up clowning, started doing kids parties, got paid the $500 per gig, started doing gigs for like IBM, some of the major hotels here. I mean, I then started as a 17-year-old. I was going to these crazy Brazilian dance parties and stuff, like with the big drums and the dancers. And I'm like 17. I'm like not even of age yet. And I'm seeing all these parties and all this like crazy stuff. And I'm like, again, it got reinforced that, hey, the non-linear path is really good. I'm earning good money. I'm doing really fun stuff. I'm meeting new people all the time. As a corporate magician, finally got to where I wanted to get to. And then I was studying to do software development at the same time. Long story short, I ended up in sales, right? Through that whole process, I ended up in sales. And very quickly, I learned, first month I ever did in sales, I did 216% and set a national record amongst thousands of salespeople. 216%. The one before that was 140%, right? My first month in sales. How did I do it? Very quickly, I sat in the chair and I started to understand what are the things in my life that are wasting my time. And I realized that I had 8 different systems. I was flicking from screen to screen to screen to screen. It was a complex company. I was dealing with a multi-billion-dollar company. I think it's about a $30 billion company. And I had to use 8 systems, for different things. Credit checking systems, CRM systems, serviceability systems across mobiles, networks. Anyway, I had 8 different systems. So the first thing I realized was that I am wasting a lot of time in my day flicking through systems. So I created a little check, and till to this day, if you could see right under my thing, I've got a little checklist of tabs that need to be open in order so that I don't waste any time. Productivity is one of the main things that you need to focus on in entrepreneurship. I'd love you to write that down. Productivity is everything. It is everything. And I can talk more about that a little bit later. But I had a little checklist of things so that I never got confused with where I was at in the sales cycle. I knew exactly what I was doing, when I was doing it, how I was doing it, and that led to the increase in performance. That's the first thing. The second thing was, because I learned people skills, I realized very quickly who's wasting my time and who's serious. And the people that are wasting time, I would get rid of them very quickly. I won't tell you how I did that. I probably used some techniques that weren't great. One of the things I used to do was speak in a different accent so that they could never trace the call back to me, right? If they were ever listening, okay, who's this guy that's just like getting rid of people? I would used to do stuff like that just to try to get through the calls as fast as possible. I'm not endorsing that you do that. There's better ways, I'm sure, but I was very young. um, they're two of the things that I think really help. Just being a people person. I want to go back to that number one point of internal dialogue. When you're in, I then got into high-end sales. I mean, by 23, I was managing Red Bull, Electrolux, Apple computers, doing multi-million-dollar deals. I was 23, so I was the youngest dude. Everyone else is like 45, 50. I'm not even 45 yet, but all the people doing that role were like 45, 50, right? So at 23, I'd got a 25-year advantage over all the people that were already been doing it for 25 years. That was my ego speaking. In their mind, they're like, who's this young kid? He's got no experience. He doesn't know what he's doing. But I kept changing roles within the company. I kept getting promoted. I went through about 6 different promotions in 4 years. Why? Because, Brandon, by the way, I haven't gotten to the second point yet. I'm still on the first point, which is internal dialogue. So within a couple of years, I kept getting promoted. Why? Because I learned the law of value. You have to provide value. You have to find opportunity and plug that opportunity. You have to be in sales. You have to be really good at exposing opportunity. I mean, really good. Some people, when I coach them, they're kind of like, I have a process that I go through, which is like a synergy call. Once they go through the synergy call, they go through a discovery call. Once they go through the discovery call, they go through a solution call, right? One of the guys that I coach, he keeps saying, I can't get people from a synergy call into a discovery call. I'm like, my brother, I do it 98% of the time. 98% of the time I can get people into a second call. I do it like rocket science. And he's like, yeah, well, people come to me, they don't have any problems. They're not opening up to me. And I'm like, well, that's bad diagnosis. You've got to be good at asking questions. And this is it's still point number one. Internal dialogue is everything. Let me explain. When I got into high-end sales, my role was to take people out for drinks and dinner. That was pretty much it. You take the most senior people you can, you find them, you take them for drinks and dinner, and you take them to parties. When I took one of the really senior guys, I was doing a really large deal. I was doing a $3 million deal with this chief information officer, and I took him out to a party. All that was happening in my head, let me tell you, was, oh my gosh, what's this guy going to think about me? I'm younger than everybody else. This guy's from a different world. He reads books. He's an academic. He went to university. He's been working for 40 years. This guy's so intelligent. He can harness lots of resources. In my mind, that's all that was going on all night, right? I had this social anxiety that just was crippling me, which is why I think I ended up going down magician, and then I went on The Voice and all that kind of stuff. But I had this like crippling anxiety in my head that wouldn't allow me to focus on the customer. So all that happened that night was I just kept asking questions. Before he could even open his mouth and ask me anything about me, I would jump in and ask him a question. So where'd you grow up? Where do you like taking holidays? What did you do on those holidays? Tell me about your family. And I learned that through that weakness, that is one of the most powerful skills you can overcome, is that internal dialogue, that voice inside you that is self-judging, that ego voice that is always trying to put you down and stop you from achieving your potential. That voice exists inside us all. And we have to learn to overcome that voice so that we can progress and elevate our lives to the next level. If I had gotten rid of that social anxiety through that call, and I was still young in my career, remember, I would have been, instead of doing that $3 million deal, I think we could have done 10, 15 million, 20 million, $30 million worth of business, because I would have asked the right questions. Instead of asking tactical questions to stop myself from being exposed, I could have really got interested in him, his career, his failings, his mistakes, the way that his success is measured, how his peers measure his success, how he measures success. If I started to understand those things that are really important to do large strategic deals, then I could have turned that into much more opportunity down the path. That's the first point, internal dialogue. From there, I ended up going on The Voice. I went and I sang in front of 4 million people. Instantly became what you call a celebrity. I mean, I remember lining up for pretzels one day, and there was a guy next to me. I could tell he was kind of like looking over at me like this. And I could just feel it burning. And I'm like, I looked at him. He's like, "Hey, I saw you on The Voice. Can I get your autograph, man?" And this sort of stuff just followed me all the time, right? What happened in that time is a concept. I didn't really learn it until about 5 years ago, maybe. It's a concept called branding. Branding, really important. Guys probably understand branding. I didn't understand branding at that time. The world's full of a lot more information now. But branding is something that is very deep. It's actually the most important thing about your sales career. It's your personal brand, who you are, what people read from you, your facial expressions, your emotive voice, the way you talk. All of these things contribute to your personal brand, as well as what can they find about you on Google. So because people can Google me and they can find me, they can search me on YouTube, they can find me, I instantly have a much more credible personal brand. So people think to themselves, well, Oscar's got all these results, then surely I want to be able to take advantage of those results. That's what people do. And so you've got to build a really strong personal brand. That's what the voice allowed me to do. Instantly from the voice, I remember I was still in sales at the time, high-end corporate sales, and I sat down with one of my clients I took him to an Argentinian steakhouse, one of the most expensive in Melbourne. And as soon as I met him for the first time, and we sat down together, he looked up at me. It's like, oh, I remember you. You were on The Voice. All of a sudden, I mean, he was asking me about my family, all this, and I learned to be a bit more comfortable with sharing my story. But we built relationships. That's the core thing. It's like you got to build relationships with these people. You got to get them to tell you about their hopes, dreams, their aspirations, those types of things, so you can get on their good side and understand how to position your services to solve their problems. I mean, if I had more time, I could tell you some really like crazy sales stories of stuff that I've had to do to get deals across the line. I mean, I'll tell you one. I was doing a very large deal with Westpac. It was a $5 million deal, and they were contracted to a company so that the company would provide a particular service. And the company was actually going over and above and over-servicing the contract in a huge way. So the client immediately felt that that was their service, that was their contract, because nobody goes back to read the contract. They just experience the service, and they use their intuition to tell them what the service should be. In a nutshell, the service that they bought was on demand, meaning you turn it on, you turn it off very quickly. The service that they were getting was always on. They never had to turn it off. Whenever they turned this service off, the bank would get attacked. Hackers would come in and try to steal data immediately, and it would cause outages for the bank. So the pain there was that anytime they turned the service off, they were getting hacked. They could end up on the media. They could end up with service outages. Can you imagine going onto your banking platform and not being able to access it? The next thing you're going to do is go to Twitter and tell everybody and complain and about how things don't work at this bank. So brand reputation is everything. So I ended up having to call a meeting with one of the most senior guys at the bank. I had to call him on the phone because I had met him for lunch. Again, the importance of relationships and building relationships. We had just met up for lunch because that was one of the things you do in sales. You just got to have lunch with everybody so that when you need a favor, you can call that favor. So I had taken this guy out for lunch. It was a senior executive. I called him. I'm like, hey, I've got a massive problem on my hands. This is the problem. And I regurgitated the problem. You're paying for a service that blah, 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 blah. And he was like, okay, give me 1 second. He walked down the hall. He brought 3 other senior executives onto the phone. He's like, Oscar, can you tell these guys what you just told me? So again, and I had my expert next to me, my technical expert, because I'm the relationship guy. And I regurgitated again what I had heard. And then they said to me, okay, can you again tell me what the technical impact of this? I had my tag in there, my technical tag, come in and hit them with all the really technical information as to why this was terrible for their business, why this is a huge risk, why this should be escalated to the board level. One of the tactics we always use is to try to escalate people to the board. So if we see inefficiency within a large deal, we then have to find a way to get the board to understand the risk so that they will actually move. Because moving a huge organization to spend 5 million, 10 million, 15 million is really hard. Like you have to move mountains at that point. Like it is so difficult that you have to do unworldly, ungodly events to try to move people forward. And so he brought people into a room. We told them the story. Within 2 months, they signed a new contract to spend a new few $1 million with me to uplift their level of protection. Why? Because we understood the contract, we understood the service, we understood the pain, we understood what results of that pain. So it's media exposure, it's this. How do you then replicate that into what you do as individuals, right? When you're on the phone in the day-to-day, well, the first thing is be really curious about your clients, like really be, understanding who they are and what they do. Get rid of that internal dialogue like I spoke about in point 1. Also, make sure that you really understand their core drivers, right? Their core drivers, because they'll always tell you shallow things. But you really got to get deep. You got to get deep. You got to understand your customer. It's an emotional labor, I find, that sales, right? It's an emotional toil. You've got to put yourself aside, and you have to 100% focus, be there with your customer to understand their world, right? Understand their pains, understand their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations, how they measure success, how other people measure their success. And the questions go on and on depending on how complex the deal is. But in a nutshell, you've got to really spend time with those customers. From there, after I went on The Voice, I ended up going around the world speaking. I wanted to go to the next level. And that's when I put together the boardroom. So collectively, we've done over 17 billion in mergers and acquisitions, which is selling businesses to either venture capitalists or to family trusts, people that are sitting on a ton of cash. Right now, I'm selling a $50 million bank in South Pacific. So if any of you know that anyone that buys banks, let me know. I can cut you in on a deal. So in a nutshell, that's what we do with the boardroom, right? Because I heard once from Steve Baxter, he's one of the sharks here on Shark Tank. He said to me, selling businesses is the hardest sale you'll ever make. And in my mind, I went, whoop, non-linear path. If that's the hardest thing that you can do in sales, I'm going to go do that. Because if I can master that, the world is going to pay me more. I'll tell you now, I'm about to close this month a $4 million capital raise. The commission on that's $385,000, right? In one go, right? So in sales, yeah, LaShawn's like, yeah, right? This $4 million bank in commission, $50 million bank in commission is going to pay me $750,000 commission, right? One deal, done, right? And when I heard that it's the hardest type of sale you'll ever do to sell a company, I thought, yep, I've got to get involved. I mean, I've done $10 million deals with banks, and I'll get paid 50 grand, right? Depending on the contract, depending on what you do, because you're selling technology. When you actually sell business to business, meaning you take one whole business and you sell it to another whole business, it is the most difficult sale you could possibly do. I mean, the amount of due diligence, documentation, contracts, shareholder agreements, organizational structures, handing over contracts, the valuation documentation that an accountant will give you, the negotiation between the shareholders who, you know what, are just emotional human beings. And some of them are kind of like, well, I don't want to raise money. I don't want to sell the business. I want to stay in the business. I'm not ready. Or in one situation that I have right now, one of the founders, for some silly reason, thinks that the company is worth 3 times what it actually is, even after we got a third-party independent assessment. So now I have to pull him into a meeting with his other founders and kind of go, why do you think that that's the valuation? And I'm the one that's negotiating on the CEO's behalf, because that's the complexity of the sale. At the end of the day, if you want to accelerate your career, get to the next level, you have to focus on the individual. Let me break this down. You have to focus on the individual, and you just have to help the individual get what they want. That's really sales in a nutshell. You have to help them get what they want, and sales is that transformation that allows that to happen. It truly is. Sales is that transformation that allows it to happen. And one of the final things I'll leave you with, or I'll leave you with 2 things. When you have a client and they're really interested, one of the rules that I've learned in this game is that you have to give the customer the least amount of information possible to get the deal done. Some of the people that I've closed, I'll talk to them for 10 minutes and close them, right? Because I know that they're ready, and I know that they're truly inspired to take action. Others, you have to meet them 4, 5, 6, and in my case, sometimes 10, 12, 15 times in order to get those larger deals. But the rule is, say the least amount of information possible, because otherwise you're going to talk yourself out of a deal. You will talk yourself out of a deal if you talk too much. So try to say the minimum amount possible to get the deal done. Really important. The other thing that I'll say is that as all of you as salespeople, as entrepreneurs, I will say this, really important for me, personal development, is that you'll never, as a visionary, you will never get to where you want to get to. And the reason is because when you get to the location or the goal that you've set, your horizon expands completely and you want more. So even if you're dreaming right now of that $3 million house, the $5 million, when you get into that house, let's say you're dreaming of a $3 million house, I guarantee within 60, 90 days, you're going to be like, yeah, I want to get to that $6 million house, or that $10 million house. And you always want, and it robs you of your joy and happiness in life. It comes like a thief in the night, and it steals all of the joy, all of the experiences, all of the powerful emotion that life has to give you. So as in sales, don't ever lose yourself in the money. The money is not important. You get to a certain point in life and money means nothing, right? It honestly means nothing. What's important is the time that you spend with your families, especially this is important now, Christmas and New Year's, spending time with your families, taking time to enjoy your life. Don't become a lost soul that just chases money. I've met so many people on my walk, so many rich people that have no soul because all they care about is results and success. They will trample people, they will step on people, they will do really bad things to people. One of my mentors, George Ross, he was Donald Trump's right-hand man. He was actually on Celebrity Apprentice. He's one of my mentors. And I will never forget the day when he told me that as a high-end negotiator, multi-billion-dollar negotiator, he was negotiating against a female lawyer to do this property deal. And he knew that she was 10 times better a lawyer. She knew more law. She was more aggressive. She knew how to get results. And in his mind, he thought, you know what? I can't win this negotiation. I cannot win this negotiation. I'm done for. But he wanted the money. He wanted the deal. And so what he noticed through this negotiation is that every time he raised his voice a little bit, she would get upset, notably upset. She would get emotional. And he thought, oh, that's it. That's the one trigger I'm going to press. So throughout that conversation, and I apologize to everybody listening, but I need to tell you the reality of what you're facing within the world. But what he realized was that if he can get her out of the room and he can get her to cry, that he would be able to win that negotiation. So he kept raising his voice and raising his voice and raising his voice until the point she started crying, and she ran out of the room. And George Ross turned to the other side, so not his client, the other side, and said, what the hell are you doing here? Can you get me a real lawyer to negotiate with? Can you go and get me a man? And I heard that and I thought, this is bad business. This is how the world works, guys. These are the richest people on the planet. They do not care about other people. They just don't. So my hope for you through this journey, and my message to the world, is to not lose yourself on this journey, guys. Like at the end of the day, we're all human. We're all one. We're all part of one family. That's really, really important to me. That all of us are part of a global community and we can all make each other better, or we can all hurt each other. Because I've seen both sides. So my hope, my wish, my dream, my aspiration for you is to not chase the money, chase the personal development, be a good person. And I guarantee that life will be so much more fun, so much richer. It will flourish so much more if you never forget the human side of what you do. And that's all I wanted to share. So thank you very much for listening, guys.
Thank you for sharing your story. Really appreciate that. That was awesome. We're going to open it up to a Q&A. So if you have a question, just hit the little hand thing. Oscar, I want to start off with a question for you is, I know how you talked about internal dialogue, and really the only thing that's going to hold you back is yourself, is having the doubt, right? So what did you kind of do to overcome that internal dialogue that you were having?
So when I was about to go to South Africa, I went to South Africa to speak, and I went through this phase in my life where I was so committed to changing the world that I lost myself. I became a lost soul because I was taking shortcuts. I was doing the wrong thing in order to go on my mission of changing the world. I was blindly obsessed with changing the world. And I remember feeling those real strong desires and pulls. And I remember just one day before I went, I decided, you know what, I'm going to just schedule some time with myself, and I'm going to ask myself why. So I remember laying in bed, why do you want to change the world so much? And a wonderful answer popped up. And again, if you have a conversation with yourself, you'll get a lot of answers. So this answer popped up that said, Oscar, you've always been driven for power, right? Red's my personality type. I'm driven for power. That's just who I am, right? And then I asked myself why again. I said, well, why are you driven for power? And that was a question I'd never asked myself before. Why you, Oscar, are driven for power? And the answer that came back was because when I was always obese as a kid, I always felt powerless. And I wanted to feel powerful. So I felt that changing the world would help me feel powerful. And that was a moment where for me, the chains I was in chains because all I wanted to do was change the world. In order for me to feel powerful, I didn't even know this, it was unconscious. I wanted to feel powerful and I wanted to help people so that I could feel powerful in helping those people. And at that point, I realized it was just a false game that I was playing. I was playing a game that I could never win. No matter how many people I could help, that wasn't going to help me feel better about myself. The only thing that can make me feel better about myself was self-acceptance, self-love, and understanding that I'm just a human being, flawed human being, just like everybody else, but I deserve to like myself. I deserve to allow myself to be free. And so I remember I was crying, tears, I was crying like a lot because it was this moment of freedom for me. So to answer your question more specifically, it's about having a conversation with yourself and starting to understand yourself a lot more. There's also a ton of personal development books. Like Jordan Peterson is one of my favorite guys in the world. scary sometimes when you start to learn about human beings and what we've been through and our DNA and the way that our brains are constructed and who we really are, our true essence of a human, what it is to be a human being. So listening to Jordan Peterson really helped me. He talks a lot about what happened with the Nazis and the Jews in Germany. He talks a lot about that and the human condition, and understanding that side of myself, that dark side of myself, was really helpful to enlighten. Like any of us put in hostile situations would act accordingly, right? We'd all shoot someone to save our baby kid or our brother or whatever it is. Most of us would do that, right? If we're put in the right situation, the right environment, our whole behavior would change, pretty much. So understanding that about myself, truly understanding myself, asking the right questions, changed my perspective on who I am as a human being. And that's how I overcame a lot of my stuff from a personal development perspective.
Awesome. Really appreciate that. We'll go over to Sergio.
One thing you mentioned was, you got on The Voice and people started recognizing you and branding in a sense. I've never been on TV, of course, but I've been in positions where a lot of the community in my niche become familiar with who I am. And so my question to you is, how were you able to take advantage of that, of them just knowing who you are and redirecting that for your purpose?
There's a few different layers of branding. One of the highest, actually the highest level of branding is what we call celebrity branding. And it's why celebrities are always on billboards. It's why brands pay millions. I mean, Ronaldo, the soccer player, makes I think it's $1.9 million per Instagram post. The reason that brands pay that is because celebrity branding is a higher level of branding than actual corporate branding. So you'll have let's say Giorgio Armani or whatever brand pay Ronaldo because that is the highest level of branding. The reason is because human beings trust what they see on TV. They trust that it's reputable, it's high quality, it's in their living rooms every day. They trust that. So if you even think about, and I've been thinking about this a lot actually, if you think about the way new great artists are released into the world, singers, they always kind of come out with a collaboration, right? It's like a collab, and then all of a sudden they're their own person. That's branding by association. That's celebrity branding and branding by association. So if you can align yourself with the celebrity in your niche, that takes your branding to the whole next level, right? It's very hard to become a celebrity. Like being a celebrity is the top 1% of top 1% of top 1%. Like it is like I've been on TV, I've done everything. Like to get to that level is ridiculous. Like your whole life has to be dedicated to being a celebrity, and it's probably not even it could be a great career path, but it can be quite devastating. So branding by association is really important. Get next to the celebrities in your industry. Get branding by association. Under that branding then sits media credibility branding. So getting featured on Yahoo Finance, getting featured on Australian Business Journal. Like I feature my clients on Australian Business Journal, so that they then become more credible. Even if they haven't even started their business, I'll throw their face on the cover of Australian Business Journal and go, "This is the most credible guy." One of my clients is in Bitcoin. And I said, okay, we'll just throw you on the cover of Australian Business Journal as the king of Bitcoin, and all of a sudden people will think you're credible in Bitcoin, right? Like that's how it works. That's the game, right? So people will just trust because it's been featured on next to a celebrity or it's been featured on publications, etc. So that's kind of, and a brand is a forever game. It's not like you get on TV and then all of a sudden you're celebrity branding. No, you got to keep it. Like you see that there's a cycle here of people that get spit up and chewed up and spit out by the media based on what's going on in life, right? 1 minute you're a celebrity, next minute you're on the street with a heroin addiction, right? Like that's the polarity that happens, right? Not all the cases, but this is what happens and why people cycle through celebrities. So just pay attention to what's going on. Try to get in front of celebrities like the Sharks, like I did. As soon as I got in front of the Sharks, my brand went to a whole different level, right? So getting in front of those, that's a lifelong game that you should all play, is the branding game. Like it's like the mini version of Monopoly. Like always play the branding game and you will always win.
So I actually was just talking to Jake and he mentioned something about, hey, I have this Spanish speaking setter. Now I am bilingual, right? And probably, I don't know if this happened to you since you moved to Australia. I don't know how many Spanish people are over there or whatever, but I used to stutter when back in Mexico, when I used to speak Spanish, I used to stutter. And so now I don't stutter after I've learned how to speak English, and I feel more comfortable delivering in English. I feel way more just comfortable overall in English. I feel like that's my first language. But when he said, hey, I might put you with someone Spanish, I was like, yeah, I'm bilingual. But like right there, for whatever, I was like, yeah, I can talk. I have no problem. But as soon as I finished saying that, like the internal talk just came back at me. It's like, oh, so what if you start presenting? What if you don't know these words? What if you start, doing all that? What if you start stuttering and you're gonna look stupid? And even I catch myself asking Jake more questions like, oh, well, giving him like, oh, I might not be able to do it because this and that if I have this. So I already started setting myself excuses. So as soon as you said internal talk, and I'm pretty good about it, but like that's something that I hadn't had an issue with because I never had to present in Spanish. I can speak Spanish to anyone, but like, with something specific, like talk about sales or anything, like I don't know the lingo in terms of that. So how do you kind of get over that? I don't know if you ever had that, like, I don't know if you're bilingual. I don't know if you still, speak Spanish. I don't know if you have like issue with that. So how do you deal with that? I guess the solution for me is just practice, just to make sure I'm ready. But like, other than that, how, like, have you ever had to deal with this? Like, and how did you deal with it if you did?
I mean, even just before I came on this call, as I was thinking about preparing, I had a voice inside my head, which was like, what if one of my competitors is on the call and they try to take some of my information, right? And then I caught myself and said, how stupid is that I'm going to perform at my less, like, what am I going to do? Sabotage myself and give less than a perfect presentation just in case someone's like, that's stupid, right? That's so dumb. And so I caught myself doing that. So my answer to you, Wilma, is that it never ends. It is constant, lifelong. And the way that I describe it, Dr. Joe Dispenza was the person that coined this phrase, but it's taming the stallion. Our brain is like a stallion, right? It's kicking. You got to think of it like this, right? It's like Robert gets it. It's a stallion. It's a wild beast. It's gonna kick you in the chest and like just knock a lung out, right? That is how powerful our mind is when it does its cartwheels and flips and wanting to go in certain directions and change. That's our brain. There's electricity in there, right? Electricity is chaos. So part of our brain structure is chaos. It's electricity. And so what we need to learn to do is to tame that stallion, is to notice it happening, is to train our brains to not go down that path. And it will, let's say you've got two paths and you're walking, you might take one step in that path and go, oh, I shouldn't go down this path. Let me correct. That happens after years of self-mastery. When you're first starting out in the journey, you might go, oh, geez, I've been walking down this path for 30 seconds. Maybe I've been walking down this path for a minute. Maybe it's 3 minutes now. Maybe something terrible happened to me and I'm walking down that path for, 7 hours. One of the reasons I went into entrepreneurship was to never have a boss. But I remember one of my clients brought in a new chief, we were doing sales expansion for my client. He brought in a new chief sales officer. He and I clashed heads because I'm an entrepreneur, right? I don't work for no one, right? So whereas he's like, no, you work for me now, and you're my, I was gonna say bitch, you're my little girl, whatever it is, you're my bitch, right? That was his, like, that's how he wanted to treat me. So we were clashing heads. We would end up in yelling matches, or he would do most of the yelling, and I would be like deflecting, going, yeah, you know what, I'm not playing this game with you, right? Because I don't lose my temper. I'm not a lose the temper guy. And we were just clashing heads, right? And I had to go back to the CEO and go, you know what? I'm not here for the money, so I'm not going to take this anymore. He ended up getting fired, and we escalated him to the head of HR because I'm like, my responsibility with that client was to advise him strategically. So, and he's the one that we're actually doing the capital raising for now. So, part of that process is that you'll always be put to the test, no matter who you are, no matter where you've got in life, you will always be put to the test, and you've got to tame that stallion. And the reason I told you that story is because after that conversation where we butt heads, I was pissed off for a good 4 hours, like 4 hours, right? And I thought I've wasted 4 hours of my whole day in a non-productive, high emotional, when you're in that mode, your prefrontal cortex, your thinking centers switch off, and you can't think strategically, you can't see clearly when you're in that state. I was in that state for 4 hours, right? And I know as a master of myself that I have to not allow those things to take more than 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 1 second. As soon as you notice the emotion, you've got to be able to switch onto the new path. But even me, I can do it sometimes in 1 second. Sometimes it takes me an hour. but it's that game that you got to play of taming the stallion and being aware of that game that you got to play. So yes, I'm bilingual. I go through the same things as you, my brother. I hope that is a good way to help, but I know we got other questions, so I'll move on.
No, thank
Thanks,
you. Thank you
Wilma.
for that.
I wanted to
Thank you,
ask
brother.
you, but because since I don't have a lot of experience in sales and influencing people, what's the best way to be able to move out of that obscurity of not knowing much about the industry and to be able to establish credibility and influence as many people as possible? I'm staying in the Bay Area right now. So I know it's a lot of opportunity in the Bay Area, but there's also a lot of people that need help. It's a lot of homeless and a lot of people that are drug dependent and a lot of unwed single moms and a lot of people that are runaways living on the streets and stuff like that. What's the best way to go from being obscure and unrecognized and unnoticed in order to be able to get as much influence as possible and to be able to build a marketing and sales business that's going to be able to help as many people as possible?
So I think the first thing I'll touch on, LaShawn, is that you are far from obscure and far from, I mean, I've been sitting in this Zoom and you're one of the people that stood out to me. Why? Because you were really listening and you were smiling, man. You were here with me. So I just want to let you know, brother, that you are awesome and that you have tons of potential and that you can never say to yourself that you're obscure and a nobody again, right? You need the key to transformation is that internal dialogue. And it's for you to spend time every day going, I will be wildly successful. I will change lives. Everywhere that I stand, I will be able to take territory. Every time that I speak, I will say something insightful that can change someone's life. That's where it starts. That's like step one, right? So let's get that internal dialogue like really solid every single day. On Spotify as well, you can find like affirmations. I went through the phase of my life where I was just listening to affirmations every day, every day, every day, every day. And so that's step one. The second step is I'm a firm believer that your environment creates your success. It's part of the reason I put together the boardroom because I heard that your income reflects the 5 people closest to you. And I know what the 5 people closest to me were earning, and I wanted to earn 100 times that. So I thought, nah, I need to go out into the world and spend more time with people that are, earning a lot more money. That's why I put the boardroom together. I mean, John on the boardroom is running a company that's $100 million business. These are the friends that I started to attract, and I started to meet with them on a weekly basis. We started to jam. We turned it into a business. We closed clients together. Now we have a ton of client delivery issues because we all run our own successful empires. Yet we're trying to build this little empire together, and none of us have any time. I got people left, right, and center throwing stuff at it. It's a disaster. It's a catastrophe. But we do that because then we all learn from each other. And I'm learning all these. One of the guys from Silicon Valley, near where you are, he's done 50 restructures and turnarounds. So companies that are on the edge of bankruptcy, he's turned them around successfully. So I'm learning under this environment because of what we go through with our shared clients. Then all the other guys are kind of like, oh, I know this. And I'm like, oh, well, I know this and I know this. And we all learn from each other. We all have something to contribute. So I would say get around, find the 5 people that you want to have income like them and and you're in Silicon Valley, man. I mean, geez, like, wow, like you're going to have so much potential there. Like you're in one of the cities in the world that has more opportunity than any other city in the world. And so get amongst it, man. Get amongst the high performers, get amongst the successful, get amongst the wealthy, get a nice suit, all these sorts of things that you got to do to get in front of these people and to take them out for coffee, whatever it is. Just get amongst it, and that will help with your self-belief. Every little win leads to a little bit more belief in yourself. So the first thing is internal dialogue. Next thing is the environment for success. And I think everything else unfolds from there if you're on that journey.
All right,
Thanks,
thank you
brother.
so much.
Thanks for the question.
I have 2 quick questions for you. Number 1, how did you go from being the magician to getting hired for this multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar companies such as Red Bull?
So I was already at 23. So I went on The Voice when I was 27. And I started working with these high-end companies when I was 23. So I didn't have to train. Like I was already on the path. What happened was, every time I then applied for a promotion, it's like word somehow. I probably spread it myself. Like whenever I meet with them, with the recruiting manager, I might just drop it into a conversation. Or so, like word just always got around somewhere. I'd always do a little seed plan, and word would just spread, and then instantly people wanted to speak to me. People wanted to come and ask me questions, right? So anytime I went for a role, whenever I changed roles, then like either before the interview or in the like as they accept me, they'll say, oh yeah, we've already shown everyone your YouTube video. So it just, that whole branding thing helped in a phenomenal way. Just people knowing me, and instantly, like I mentioned before, it's the trust. As soon as they see you on TV, they trust you, so they're going to come and ask you questions, etc. So I think it's, if there's a way to get on TV, I highly recommend doing it, especially on one of those like shows, because it does, it's extreme, but it is super helpful for your for people recognizing you and knowing you and trusting you.
Got you. Thank you. My second question is regarding your mentor, George Ross, and the incident that happened with the female lawyer. As a female, what's your best advice to deal with a situation like that for a woman?
Yeah, I think well, the first thing is, I think it's really important. One of the most important things for your success is emotional mastery. And if that lady had not flared up emotionally, she would have won that negotiation. Fair and simple. So he found a weakness and exposed that weakness. The weakness that is the most exposable weakness of all weaknesses is that emotional instability, right? And I say this to my CEOs every time when they're negotiating, and all of a sudden they act out of emotion. You can instantly tell when that mood changes, and all of their credibility, all of the things that come out of their mouth next are just irrelevant now because the person's emotional. So what happens? So let's say you and I are in a conversation, and you then suddenly become emotional. In my head, the first thing that I do, any other human being would do, is kind of like disengage. I want to distance myself from this person now. That's all that happens, right? And so in those situations, as a woman or as a man, emotional mastery is going to be the most important thing, because as soon as you lose your emotion, you lose all credibility. So I think to put it simply, well, okay, that's the first thing, emotional mastery. The second thing is like, just be awesome. Like, know your worth and know that you're awesome, and know that there's going to be people that are better than you, but they've also got weaknesses in other areas where you're better than them. And so it's about playing that game. So George Ross's weakness, George Ross's weakness in that case is that he's just ruthless. So the lawyer could have turned to his CEO and said, "Can you put your dog on a leash?"
Ooh.
Right? So that would have then shut him up and put him under the table, right? So there's always a game to play, and you got to make sure that you're open to playing that game when it comes to transacting. So that's just an example, but I think there's some of the things that might work.
Love it. Thank you so much, Oscar. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
I was just wondering if you had a bit of any sort of advice on what would be a good kind of area to go into with that kind of background. And the second part, I guess, is that you mentioned about getting in front of people that are kind of prominent in your area. I was interested in doing sort of like burnout coaching for healthcare professionals. So I got in front of a very prominent person in the US that does that, and he just kind of poo-pooed it, and he said, "Don't do it. Don't get into it. You'll never make a go out of it. Even though I have 10,000 or 80,000, whatever, clients, nobody else can do it." So I'm just curious how you would deal with that.
Yeah, good question. Can I ask you to repeat what industry are you in now? And I apologize, it cut out a little bit, but you said you lost someone dear to you recently. So my condolences to you on that as well.
Yeah, and I had lost my medical license about 18 months ago or so. Yeah, right now I'm actually running the Canadian franchise for Limelight. But just kind of, looking for something as sort of a passion project in addition to that.
Yeah, for sure. Personality is going to determine what you define success. And so if at 80,000 clients, you kind of like, or whatever that big number was that other guys did, it sounds like he has a lot more internal work to do. That whatever he's doing isn't floating his boat, right? He's not getting whatever fulfillment, whatever passion. So I wouldn't use that measuring stick to measure yourself against, Robert, because you guys are completely different human beings, completely different individuals. Maybe you've got a bigger heart to serve than he does. Maybe he's just in it for the cash, and he's kind of like, you know what, this is a whole bunch of hard work that I don't like doing anyway. For, you know, even if he's earning millions of dollars, he's kind of like, you know, the amount of pain that I put into this is not worth $1 million. If you spend your day focusing on things that you're not strong at, things that you're weak at, things that don't ignite you, things that don't make you feel passionate, things that are low on your value scale, then you're going to end the day with less energy than when you started. If I spent all day speaking to you guys and coaching and mentoring and just talking, I would have more energy at the end of the day than when I started. So that's what you got to look for in life, is you got to look for those things that give you more energy than steal things away. So my suggestion for you, Robert, is to go inward, and my advice is always inward. Find out what are your core values, right? What do you really value? And the things that you value, just to give you an example, the things that you surround yourself with, the things that you fill your calendar with, the things that you do are the things you value most. So find a way to monetize bringing those things even closer to you. The other thing that I would suggest is pivot from your greatest experiences. So if you've had medical experience, maybe you could find doctors that are just opening their practices, or doctors that have a practice but aren't getting enough lead flow, right? Because you're in sales now, right? Maybe they don't have a sales process. Like, there's tons of doctors in my circle as well that just don't know anything about sales. So if you can help all doctors with better sales practices to increase their billing, like, you just walk into a doctor's office and say, look, I can improve your billing by 30%. You just let me roll out my processes. I've been doing this. I've had a medical license in the past. Like, don't go into the negative stuff. And then I've headed sales for, you know, this company, and so this is what I do now. Like, they would pay you to come and help them with their sales processes. And one of the other things that I would always advise, especially in high-end sales, is the notion of a success fee. You know, if I didn't, like, I earn more from success fees than I do from retainers. So always, you know, look for the retainer, like get the client to pay you upfront and ongoing. But the success fee element, that's where you really make your money, right? That's where you really make your money. So if you're going to go into this practice or do whatever you do, try to weave in a success fee into it, so that when the practice flourishes, you can also take benefit from that flourishing as well. So hopefully that helps you, Robert.
Hugely beautiful. Thank you so much. Honor.
No worries.
I actually have a couple of questions. One of the things, or the very last thing that you said, you had talked about, you know, enjoying the journey, enjoying the process, and just constantly being focused on improving yourself as a person, and getting better all the time as a person, and not focusing on money, and enjoying that. What would your advice be specifically to enjoying that process and enjoying that journey, while at the same time knowing that there are going to be times throughout that journey where you're going to have to go through things that are going to be painful, but it's necessary for you to go through in order to get to something else that you're toward a goal that you're working on. How do you enjoy that part of it?
There's two layers to this that I think are really important. The first layer is perspective, and it's understanding that, you know, we live on a billion-year-old Earth, and humans have been around for however many years, depending on what you believe. And in the context of that billion-year history of human beings, you're here for like a blink, right? Like a second. Like when you scale it out to that perspective, right? You know, planets all have a life cycle. Like Earth has a life cycle. Like, it was born on a certain date and it will end on a certain date. Everything in life has a life cycle, including you, including I, including the Earth. And what we hope for is that humans can go on forever, that we can continue to push on, to expand the race, to get better, to innovate more, to build new technologies, to develop things that haven't even been thought of yet, but in 500 years, people are going to be thinking of that, right? So first thing is context. It's like, we are so unimportant in that scheme of things when you look at it from that perspective. But when you drill down to the macro level, we have so much importance, because what we do here impacts our family, impacts our friends, impacts perhaps, I mean, depending on the level of impact you have, impacts the community. Depending on the level of impact you have, you could impact globally. Like, you could do something that will change the world forever. right? Like you could, like you have the potential within you to do that if you became studious, you read books, you implemented, you became disciplined, you started to control your mind, you started to learn to harness resources, you started to learn to build relationships with people with capital, and you could, you know, put together a $5 million deal to put together a project that could change the world, right? You have the capacity to do that. There's no question. So when you put that in context of, you know, on a macro level, it kind of doesn't matter. On a micro level where you exist today, like everything that you do matters. And the only, so that to deal with the hard times as they come, which is the second part of your question, to deal with the hard times as they come, what we need to do at that point is really drill into the micro existence that we have in front of us, like right this second. And you can do that by taking a deep breath and feeling the air go into your lungs. You can do that by sensing the sensation on your skin. You can do that by feeling the sensation running down your legs at the moment. You can do that by really harnessing the sound of my voice as I speak to you, and letting it wash over you, like this present moment. The most powerful moment in the history of the world is right now. That is the most powerful moment. Like the potency of the past is gone. The future, will it happen? Who knows? All we have is right now. And so firstly, it's like, let's realize that in context, all of our problems are insignificant compared to the universe, compared to the world. And then secondly, like tap into that universe, like right now, like the energy flowing through us, the oxygen flowing through us, tap into that power right now. And that's how you deal with the day-to-day. And it's kind of like going to the gym, you know, you lift weights, and, you know, I used to be a bodybuilder. So, you know, you lift weights, it hurts. The first couple of times you go to the gym, you're like, yeah. And then the next couple of days, you're like, oh, my arms, they hurt, whatever. After a while, you fall in love with the pain. Like you fall in love with being sore, because you know that's where the results are. You know that anytime you feel that pain, there are results bubbling to the surface. And so that's what we have to do in life, is kind of go, you know what? The pain is the growth. The pain is what I want. I want the pain of the day-to-day. I need that. I eat that pain. I fuel that pain. That's how we get our lives to the next level. Like we have to want that pain, and we have to live through it. We have to bear through it. We have to get the discipline, and all that stuff's painful. But that's where the growth comes from.
Guys, what is up? It's your boy Mike Barron. Thank you for checking out the channel. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you don't, I'm gonna come through this computer screen and close you up my damn self. Let's go. I'll see you at the top.